Good morning, kids. How are you? This is Dr. Annette Feravich. Let's just check all of our signals with my crew that I have over here. Check, sound. Yeah, we're on. Recording. Okay, now we are official. As I said, this is Dr. Annette Feravich. I am the teacher, and this is the early bird classroom that you are in. Okay, so what are we doing today? Well, this week today is Tuesday, May 2nd. Yesterday was May 1st, which we used to call in the olden days, we used to call it May Day. And I remember my mom used to call it May Day. And I was thinking, why did she call it May Day? What was it? May 1st is May Day. What does that mean? Is it like D-Day? I didn't know. You might not know either. You probably haven't even heard of it. So I looked it up. And May Day just is like, and she told me that too. I remember her telling me that it was like spring. It was like when we celebrate spring. But spring is April 21st. So why are we, right? No, March 21st. Right? Yes, is spring, is the first day of spring. So why would we be celebrating May Day? But as you know, it's not like spring at all on the first day of spring, not in Michigan anyway. And we kind of have all of the four seasons, so I think we're a pretty good judge of when spring actually does kind of feel like spring. And that's May 1st. Although look at outside. You can't see there. It's kind of, there's a glare there. But when you look outside there, it's pretty gray. Look, both my flowers. See what I do with my flowers? I repurpose. Well, I don't repurpose them. I reuse them is what I do. So I take out the dead flowers and I keep the live flowers. And those tiger lilies, which are here too, are kind of like small tiger lilies. These things last a long time. I'm so happy. And I pulled these things out 3 times now and put them in 3 different bouquets. And I pulled these out because these last a long, long time. Aren't those cute? Those are really cute. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. We are reading from the Reader's Digest Bible for Children. I put it up here after I was done working last night. Not too late, but a little late. Trying to get ready for today, but not too late for me. So, do you remember where we were? Well, where we are, because I didn't tell you what the story was going to be today. So where we are in our Bible stories is we're talking about Noah. So this is the story of Noah. And if you remember, you probably remember the story of Noah because we already talked about that in our Tales of Virtue class, in our story. Do you remember what his virtue was? I think I remember. But let's go ahead and let's read this story. And maybe when I'm reading it, you will remember what Noah's virtue is. And we'll go back and take a look at it. I didn't ask that in the questions. I didn't put that in the questions. What was Noah's virtue? I should have done that. And a little bit of comparing and contrasting too, right? So for a little bit older students, what we always want to do is when we first see something, this is what the brain does, is it compares, which means that it looks for things that are similar. Like when you look here, what's similar, right? Well, what's similar is I have flowers, I have books, I have the curtain, I have my tree up there. So those things are similar, but what's different? Well, my outfit is different. Our story's going to be different. The flowers are there, but they're different flowers, right? The books have some newer books in there. Maybe you noticed that. They're mostly the same. The only one I put up there was this one here, our Reader's Digest Bible for Children. So comparing is looking for things that are the same. When we do a contrast, that's looking for things that are different. So that's what our brain naturally does. Our brain naturally looks for things to compare. What is the same first? That's what the brain looks at for the same. Because it can't know what's different until it has like about enough the same things to know what's different. And actually, that number is about 25. Yeah, I know. We could share so many ideas, huh? So when do we contrast? After about 25 comparing. After about 25 the sames, we begin to contrast. Let's go ahead and get started. And in your own mind, you can compare and contrast to our story that we had of Noah. This one's a little bit more in depth, you can already tell, right? I don't know why they have such small people, though. They're such short people, like, I don't know why. The story of Noah. Men and women increased in number, multiplying throughout the earth. Because remember, we were talking about Adam and Eve, right? And God saw that they were wicked. God said, I shall wipe them from the face of the earth, both humans and beasts, all creatures, great and small, and even the birds in the sky, for I am sorry I made them. Oh my gosh. That seems so horrible to think about. And I want to stop there for a minute because I remember when I was little thinking about that. And after I heard that story and thinking that God was so disappointed with his own creation. And I'm sure that God was not disappointed with the trees. And I just thought of this. It is kind of very sad. I'm sure God wasn't disappointed with the trees, and God wasn't disappointed with the birds, and God wasn't disappointed with the deer in the field, and God wasn't disappointed with the antelope, or he maybe was a little disappointed in mosquitoes and spiders. He probably was a little disappointed in those. Maybe that's the reason why he did it. No, he already told us why he did it. He told us because he does always tell us. He told us it was because people were wicked is what he told us. And, wicked means mean. They were mean is what they were. People were mean to one another. And if people are mean to me, I don't have the right, like God does, right, to get rid of them, obviously. But we can get rid of them out of our lives. And I can understand why we wouldn't want wicked people on the planet. They ruin our planet, right? They ruin our friendships. They ruin our families. Wickedness ruins things is what wickedness does. And isn't it kind of interesting because he loved us so much, he wiped everything out except for us. He wiped everything out except for what? One family, Noah. It's such a story to learn something about, being wicked and being appreciative of the things that God made us. It's such a good story about that. But in some ways, it's also a kind of a sad story too, isn't it? But there was one good man. His name was Noah, and he had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Yeah, that's how you say it. I practiced it, and now all of a sudden I'm here in front of the camera. I'm like, what is that name again? I'm going to say it in a minute. I hope I say it right. God said to Noah, build an ark, a great wooden boat, and put a roof over it. Go into the ark with your family and take with you a pair of every kind of animal, those that walk and those that crawl, even the birds that fly. For in 7 days I shall make it rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. Oh my gosh, remember that? Do you remember that? That it rains for 40 days and 40 nights? I don't think it told us that in the book, the Tales of Virtue book. I don't think it told us that it rained for that 40 days, but I did. When I talked to you, I said it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. That's a long time. Sometimes in Michigan, I feel like it rains for 40 days and 40 nights, but it's not a constant rain that would flood everything. Thank goodness. Woo, right? Noah did what God told him to do. He built a big ark, and into it he took his family and 2 of every animal, great and small, even the birds of the sky. And God shut the door behind him. And God shut the door behind him because it had to be a pretty big door, right? God shut the door behind him. Isn't that kind of cool a little bit? The rain fell and the waters climbed, lifting the ark higher and higher. The floods covered the entire earth, even the highest mountains. All things that lived on dry land perished. Only Noah remained, and those who went with him on the ark. So we knew that from the last story, right? But everybody perished. What does that mean? In the flood, they all died. Why? Do you remember? Yeah. We're going to ask that question again, right? So do you remember why? Because they were wicked. They were wicked. And again, wicked people do wicked things to us and to our friends and family and to our planet too. It's kind of a sad story. But when there's an end, there's a new beginning. Days passed, but God had not forgotten Noah. The rain stopped and the wind blew. Slowly the waters began to subside, and the ark came to rest on a mountaintop. So subside there means that they began to disappear, right? They began to, we call it evaporate, is what they ended up doing. But they began to disappear so that they could see dry land. And the ark came to rest on a mountaintop. Noah waited 40 days. He released a raven, which flew back and forth, waiting for the waters to dry. Then Noah released a dove, which returned to the ark, for she had found no place to set her feet. So he let a dove go. He released a dove. A dove went flying. Thank goodness he had birds, right? And a dove went flying, but it came back because it didn't have a place to rest its feet. Noah waited 7 more days and released the dove again. In the evening, the dove returned. In her beak, she was holding a small olive branch. And Noah knew the waters had gone down. So that's what subside means. They started to subside. The water started to go down. Do you know that when we give somebody an olive branch, even to this day, what that is like a peace offering? That's what that means. Or even something like olive oil, right? If we gave olive oil and not Popeye's olive oil. None of you probably know who olive oil is from Popeye. It doesn't even matter because that was a joke. Anyway, so we might give olive oil to somebody, that an olive branch. That symbolizes that it's I want to have peace with you. I want to make peace with you. Or what we do is we give somebody, especially in the olden days, we would invite them in and give them bread and olive oil to eat. And the olive oil would have spices in it, right? And it would so that's the reason why, if you listen to our Bookless class, why spices were important. Why? To make our food delicious. It used to be bland. So olive oil, just taste olive oil. It's okay, but maybe it was more delicious in their days, right? But if you got spices from East Asia, then you could make it delicious. Listen to our Bookless classroom because we talk about stuff like that. Okay, all right. He waited 7 more days. So there's 40 days and then 7 days and then 7 days. So that's 2 more weeks on top of the 40 days that they were in that boat. Again, he released the dove, and this time she did not return. Noah looked and saw that the land was dry. Look at that. He's probably pretty happy. Look at that ark. Oh my gosh, it's so extraordinary. You know what? I got a picture of an ark. There's 3 arks on the planet. 3 arks. One is actually in Kentucky. Another one is in the Netherlands. And another one is in China, if you can believe that. I actually got a picture of the one in the Netherlands. You can look up the one in Kentucky. That one's a little bit controversial, I think. I think that they kind of want to stick to what the Bible says is what people want to do. They kind of want to stick to what the Bible says and not make arguments about it, right? Let's talk about comparing the things that are similar that we both enjoy and like. We're going to talk about that too. Wait, stay tuned. At God's command, Noah left the ark with his family and all the animals. Then God said, "Never again will I destroy the earth because people are wicked. So long as the earth lasts, there will be sowing and reaping, summer and winter, day and night." Like it was in the beginning, right? Let there be light. And he separated the night from the day, didn't he? Like in the beginning, right? But sowing and reaping, what is that? Sowing is planting, and reaping is getting your food from the plants. That's reaping. So we also call it harvesting is another thing, right? During the fall, we harvest, we get all of the rest leftover fruits and vegetables that we haven't eaten, right? As we picked them off and ate our tomatoes or got our potatoes for that night or whatever for dinner. That's what they would do. And then at the end was the harvest, where they would collect all of their food, kind of like a Thanksgiving in the fall is what it is. Their leftover food that they had in the fields, and share it with everybody in the community. Isn't that awesome? Not so much competition, right? Maybe we need some more cooperation, maybe not so much competition. And God said to Noah, "Today I make a promise, a covenant with you and your children and your children's children." A covenant is a promise. That's what that is. It always uses that fancy word in the Bible, but every time it uses that fancy word in the Bible, it means a promise. A promise, right? So here we can begin to see how God is trying to keep his word. He keeps his word, right? But he's trying to show us that he's going to keep his word. And we know that because of time, right? We know that because of the passage of time. Has it ever happened again that God flooded the entire earth? Not to my knowledge. Look, I have set a rainbow among the clouds. It is the sign of my covenant with all things living on the earth. Never again will I send a flood to destroy them. And there's all the animals 2 by 2. Do you know why they had 2 animals? Male and female, right? Male and female, so that they could have babies. And that's the end of our story for today. That is the end of our story for Noah. All right, so let's look at a couple things. Let's start by looking at, I have to move something here. Okay, but we are going to start by looking at our questions. Ugh. Okay. I don't know why I had to do that, because we want to see this. So we've got the story of Noah, right? Big, small, big, small, big, small, big, small. The story of Noah. And then we're also going to review our questions from Adam and Eve in the garden. Okay? Now, we talked a lot about some of these, we talked about some of these questions. So we should know some of these answers because we've already talked about some of them. Why was there a flood? Why was there a flood? Do you think God gets upset sometimes? When might God get upset? So why was there a flood? Do you think that God gets upset sometimes? And when might God get upset? Remember, we're going to ask the questions today, and then on Thursday, we're going to go over the answers in our review. And tomorrow is what? What do we do on Wednesdays? What do we do on Wednesdays? Phonics on Wednesdays. So don't forget, we'll be doing phonics tomorrow. Okay? And then we'll come back and answer these questions on Thursday. What is an ark? Who built the ark? Who and what was on the ark? Do you think if God asked you to build, that's supposed to be an ark, you would? Do you think if God asked you to build an ark, you would? So, what is an ark? Who built the ark? Who and what was on the ark? Do you think if God asked you to build an ark, you would? What did the people do? Do you think this was fair? Okay, so what did the people do in Noah's ark? And do you think this was fair? I don't remember why I asked that question. That kind of seems like a silly question. I'm not sure why I was asking that question. See if you know an answer to that question. I was thinking of something. How long did it rain? Why did Noah release a dove? What happened to the dove? Maybe that was a question for our last story, Adam and Eve. I don't know. What did the people do? No, wasn't for Adam and Eve. I don't know. What was God's promise after the flood? Did God keep his word? Did God keep his word? Do you think God always keeps his word? What did God send to remind us of his promise? All right. So, what was God's promise after the flood? Did God keep his word? Do you think God always keeps his word? What did God send to remind us of his promise? And remember, I put here, covenant is a promise usually found in the Bible, because when God makes a promise, he uses that word all the time. So, and we don't usually say, I'm going to make a covenant with you. We say, I'm going to make a promise with you, right? Or a promise to you. A promise usually found in the Bible, made by God to his creation. So that's what a covenant is. All right, let me show you something before we get to the next slide. And that is, and they call it Jonah's Ark. Jonah's Ark this is in the Netherlands, so likely the Dutch name for Noah. And there you, and isn't that interesting, because Jonah and the whale, right? So I don't know. It's so interesting, a little bit interesting anyway. But there's the ark, and it literally sits in a harbor there. So somebody built the ark in the Netherlands, and there is a similar ark, which I didn't get the picture of, and probably should have for you. And was going to, and will actually Thursday. So on Thursday we'll see the other pictures of the ark. I'll make sure that I have those up for you. But isn't that extraordinary? The reason why I didn't show you the one in Kentucky or put the picture up there, first of all, I think that this one seems like they both used the same measures that are the measures in the Bible. So you know that this is the same shape and size that God ordered Noah to make. Now that's interesting about the rounded ends there. I don't know how they bowed that wood to make that wood round like that. So I don't know about that, but I just think that looks so awesomely cool, don't you? And it goes to show you also that that's one of the things about the Bible, is that you can check God's word, right? So you can see if God kept his word. And so if God said, bring 2 of every animal, could you build an ark and have 2 of every animal? And look at the little windows there too. I mean, it is just built to scale on according to Bible measurements there. And then in the one in Kentucky, what they do is they actually do have life-size animals all throughout the ark. One of the strange things about the one in Kentucky, though, I'll tell you, is that they placed dinosaurs on there. And so it seems to me that dinosaurs would have been, maybe that's their point, dinosaurs would have been wiped out in the flood. And this really can match history. I want to get to our questions and stuff and not get too deep into this, because I do talk about some of these things a little bit more deeply in some of my other classes. And I kind of want to stick to our topic here, because I know that this is an early bird topic, and we usually have younger people here. And so I don't want to get too much into that. But in the Kentucky one, they were talking about dinosaurs. And so they were kind of making fun of the one in Kentucky. I haven't been there. I have tickets actually to go, but that was long before COVID, and I got them from, the internet. So they said they're good forever. I don't know if they're still good. I've always wanted to take my family there. But the thing about it is I want to know what they're saying about the dinosaurs. If they said they couldn't have dinosaurs on there, it sounds to me like there was room for dinosaurs, maybe. I don't know if there was room or not. And maybe they all got wiped out in the flood. Let me show you what else I want. Let me show you what else I want to show you. And that is this. Look at this. What this is this is, as you can probably read, other stories of a great flood. And I didn't write down, some of them I compressed into like the Americas, so North America, South America. And remember that often this, or not often, this was ancient times. For everybody, this was ancient times, right? When there was a great flood. But Africa, in Africa, it's Egypt. The Americas, North and South America, Australia. In the Aztecs, we read about them in the Bookless classroom. The Mayans, which is from the same area as we were talking about as the Aztecs, as we were talking about in the Bookless classroom. The Incas, from China, from India, Iran, Indonesia, Japan, Korea, Malaysia, the Philippines, Thailand, Taiwan, Vietnam, Serbia, Ireland, Wales, and Finland. All of those countries have an ancient story or a story of an ancient flood. All of those areas, countries, big areas on the map have a story of an ancient flood. Can you believe that? Can you believe that all those places share the same story? So here's my next question for you then. What do you think about all those other places in the world that have stories of a great flood? Does that make you think it was more or less likely to have happened? So when you see all of those places that I named there that all have stories of a great flood, do you think that it means that it happened for sure? Or do you think maybe that means no, it probably didn't happen? Because if they're all telling the same story, well, how did it happen in Noah? What do you think about that? We all share this same story, almost across the globe, it seems like. We all share this same story of Noah's flood. Does that make you think that it probably did happen? Or no, it couldn't have happened because they tell it in their country and it happened over here? What do you think? What do you think? I know, kind of a hard question. Also, another question that I wanted to get to is, do you remember the virtue that Noah had in our Tales of Virtue? Let me go over here and get our book. So, speaking of all animals, look, I have my animal print on today. It was so appropriate for Noah's Ark, isn't it? Oh my gosh. So, here is our, if you remember, here is our Tales of Virtue book. Remember our Tales of Virtue book? A book of right and wrong, the beginner's Bible. So we told some of these stories that were the old stories from the Bible. Remember this? So we had forgiveness on Joseph. I'll put that up a little bit closer. Loyalty, Ruth and Naomi. Responsibility, Adam and Eve. Oh my gosh, that's right. We did talk, I think, a little bit about that Adam and Eve was a story of responsibility when we read the story of Adam and Eve again. Friendship, David and Jonathan. Remember that story? They were good friends. Courage by Esther. Obedience, Jonah. Sharing, Elijah. Patience, Hannah. Work, Noah. So that was what we were learning about work. There's lots of different words that we use to talk about work or when we mean work. Sometimes we say effort, like you put a really great effort towards something. That's work when you put an effort towards it, right? Sometimes work is responsibility. So sometimes those words are the same. Remember, we talked about responsibility for Adam and Eve. They had the responsibility to take care of our planet and our whole entire earth, right? So that's another word for work is responsibility. They're kind of the same. Or we even say words like diligent. When somebody is diligent, that's they're working hard. Or fortunately. Oh, and there we go. Good. So it'll come back on in just a minute. And even though you see that it's stuck, there we go. I'm back on again. And back off and back on. Yay. Okay. So let's go ahead before, we have another natural disaster here like the flood. Only internet crisis. And let's move on with our questions. Now we're going to review Adam and Eve now. So doing our review questions from Adam and Eve. All right? So who was Adam and how was he made? Do you remember that? So who was Adam? Adam was the first person ever made, right? So, and how was he made? Do you remember? And the story here, so we're talking about this story here, right, from the Bible stories. And our second story in the Bible stories was about Adam and Eve. And so they were in the Garden of Eden. Let's take a look at the pictures because those pictures are always really pretty if you remember. So there they were in the Garden of Eden, if you remember, okay? And this kind of gives you a clue, doesn't it, as well? Because that's an upcoming question. Means that question is coming up in a minute. So do you remember how Adam was made? So Adam was the first human being that was made on day number 6, if you remember. Day number 6, Adam was made. And Adam was made by what? Here it is. God breathed the breath of life into the man's nostrils, and the man came alive. So he came alive with God's breath. Isn't that amazing? Why not? Why not? Isn't that what you probably would do? Let's say that I have a story that I've told about making a little unicorn. So let's say that you made a little unicorn. And so you made it and it looks beautiful. How would you get it alive? If you could make it come to life, how would you make it come to life? Wouldn't you give it a breath of life? Wouldn't you do that? Isn't that how you would make it? If we found somebody who was in the water and didn't look like they were alive, what was the first thing that we would do? We would give them mouth to mouth. We would give them the breath of life is what we would do. Yeah, that's what we would do for one another before COVID. Is if somebody needed a breath of life, we would give it to them. That's what happened to Adam. God gave him the breath of life. It makes sense, doesn't it? It's not God stuck a wind up into his back and wound him up and he became alive. That doesn't make any sense. God took a little mallet, conked him on the head, and he came alive. That doesn't make any sense. But what makes sense is that God breathed life into him, doesn't it? It doesn't make any sense that God struck him with lightning and he came to life. That doesn't make any sense. But what would you do if you wanted to give your unicorn that you made life? What would you do? Wouldn't you do that? Wouldn't you do that? I think I would. Maybe sprinkle some dust on it. Maybe do that. I don't know. But I don't have any of that dust. I do have breath. And I do know it gives life to people if they can't breathe. I do know that. Isn't that interesting? So God did something that totally makes sense to me. Okay, so who was Adam? How was he made? And what was his job? What was his job? His job was to take care of the garden, to take care of the planet, to name the animals and take care of our planet. That was his job, right? Let me get I'm going to leave that there and let me get these questions in front of me. Okay, here we go. All right, so who was Eve? How was she made? And what does the name Eve mean? Okay, so I just want to say, see if they were showed that in here. Yes, they did. So remember this. So God put man, Adam, in a deep sleep, and he took a rib from his chest. Oh, sorry. There we go. And he took a rib from his chest, and from that rib, God formed a woman. When the man saw the woman, he cried, "Here is my partner, my helpmate." Is that what woman means? Is that what Eve means? Is that what Eve means? Do you remember what Eve means? I know, that was way back on Thursday. That is really hard to remember. But woman means, I don't know if they say it right here. Yes, they said it at the end of the story. That's what I thought. I wanted to see. So, God called her Eve, which means living, because she is the mother of all who are living. So, like kind of, yeah, living. Eve means to bring forth life. Living. Isn't that awesome? Isn't that awesome? And then God said, "You're on your own, Adam. Go ahead and name all the animals now yourself. And watch over this planet. Watch over this planet." Yeah. Yeah, kind of like Batman. Sometimes we have to be, right? That's what I just thought of. I just thought of, yeah, kind of like Batman. Okay. Where did Adam and Eve live? Where did they live? They lived in the Garden of Eden, right? They called that the Garden of Eden. What were the two trees that God planted in the garden? Do you remember that? So that I gave you a clue in the first picture there. So let's go and turn that off. Remember? So here, there were two trees. God planted two trees, the tree of life and the tree that gives knowledge of good and evil. Which tree couldn't they eat from? They couldn't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That's the tree. They could eat from the tree of life, which had wonderful fruit in it, right? But they couldn't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Do you think you know why they couldn't eat from that tree? Why do you suppose that they couldn't eat from that tree? Oh, I wasn't even on the right one. There we go. I think because God wanted to protect us. I think that God didn't want us to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil because he didn't want us to have knowledge of evil. Because then we had very wicked days like we saw with Noah, right? And God didn't want us to know about wickedness. Because then we might choose wickedness over him. And you know what God did? He gave us a choice. That's what he did. He let us choose. He didn't want to make us love him if we didn't want to love him. He let us have a choice is what he did. And yeah, so we wanted to choose to know both bad and good. That's what we chose. When we chose, and you might say something like, "But that's what Adam and Eve chose. I wouldn't choose that. I wouldn't choose it if God asked me not to choose that." You know what? Adam and Eve are examples of what everybody would do. They're examples of what everybody would do. Everybody would have been connived. Everybody would have been lied to and would have believed the lie. Why? Why? Because Adam and Eve were innocent. Just like most of you are very innocent. I don't know that you're all young, but young people are very innocent. They don't know a lot about the wicked things that go on in the world. Why? God didn't want them to know. But you know what? All of us wanted to know. But you know what? That's a good thing. That's a good thing. And do you want to know why that's a good thing? That's a good thing because then we choose him of our own free will. We see good and we see evil. Not that that tree's evil, but we see good and bad. And then we choose him. And that's what he wants. He didn't want to make us into robots. He didn't want to make us into robots that would just go, yes, I love God. Yes, I love God. Yes, I love Jesus. Yes, I feel the Holy Spirit. He didn't want to make us into robots. He wanted us to know good and bad and choose good. That's the whole important part of this whole story. That's the whole important part of this whole story is that God said, don't do it. Don't do it. And even though Adam and Eve said, I'm going to do it, they were tricked. And so would you have been tricked. And so would I have been tricked because we're all tricked by evilness. We just are. We just are tricked by evilness. It happens pretty easily, especially when we're young. Why? Because we don't know badness. That's the reason why. And we're tricked by it. It's sad. But the good thing is that then we can choose God. And he didn't have to make us choose him by only showing us the good things, like we're going to talk about in Job later on. He didn't make us love him by only showing us the good things. Okay. What were the rules? So, where did Adam and Eve live in the Garden of Eden? What were the two trees that God planted in the garden? The two trees were the tree of life and the tree that gives knowledge of good and evil. Not just good, but good and evil. Those were the two trees. And let me see here. What were the rules? The rules were that they had to take care of the garden, right? And those are still the rules today. The rules today are that if we want to keep this planet, we have to take care of it. The same rules for Adam and Eve are the same rules today. And there's a lot of parts on this planet that are not anywhere near this pretty, right? Where we can walk up and pet the animals just like we always wanted to play with them like they were our pets, just like we've always wanted to. That's the way it was supposed to be. But we wanted to know about badness. And so we learned about badness. That's what happened. It's all of God's stories are kind of sad. Almost all of God's stories are kind of sad. Why? Because they're only there to teach us something. This story only is here to teach us something. Probably about taking care of the planet is my guess. And because we couldn't take care of the planet, what happened? See you later, alligator. That's what happened, right? I don't know why I feel like we didn't read the story. What happened? Did we not read this story? I have a feeling we didn't. What did we do on Thursday? We went through all of those other questions is what we did, but we should have read the story. Did we read the story? I have to look back now. Because all of a sudden, yeah, we read the story. We read the story. All of a sudden, this is not coming to me. Like all of these pictures. I didn't look at the pictures. I think that I was hurrying up reading it and not looking at the pictures because I'm not remembering these pictures. See what happens if you don't look at something and notice it? If you don't look at something and really notice it. I was probably trying to hurry past these scary pictures. Look at that serpent snake there. I don't remember talking about them being naked, though. I don't know. That was a long time ago. All of our memories are going. No, I have to look at that and see. I usually don't look back at my videos that I've done in the classrooms, and I'm wondering why we would not have gotten to Adam and Eve. Although, yeah, because we were there Thursday and everything was good Thursday. I probably hurried past those, didn't want to think about them. Maybe. So the rules were that they had to take care of the garden, right? Let's see here. Let me not read it up with my eyeballs like that. I'll read it from here. What did God say would happen if Adam or Eve ate from the tree that gives you knowledge of good and evil? Well, what he said is that they would die. Would you want to know everything there is to know about good and evil? Would you want to know everything there is to know? That was what God was giving them the choice of. Do you want to know everything there is to know about evil? Because you can't know good without knowing bad. It's kind of a weird thing. It's hard to know. If all I had were good things, good things, good things, I would be shocked by something that happened that was bad, right? So, would you want to know only the good things in life? And kind of sometimes, right? Sometimes people do only want to know the good things in life. But that's kind of the lesson about the knowledge of good and evil. Then don't eat from the tree. And what does that mean? That means this. If you don't want to know about evil, if your choice would be that, no, I wish I didn't know about badness, then you need to stay away from it. You're not mean. You don't become a bad person, right? Adam and Eve they shouldn't become bad people. Noah didn't become a wicked person, right? Noah didn't become a wicked person, but he had to see it, right? He had to see it. So would you want to see it, or would you just want to be? And if I see it, then I have the choice to choose only good. If I see badness, I have the choice to choose good. And that's what God wants you to do. God wants you to choose good. And every single day, we have a choice, and we can choose to do something wrong or to do something right every day. And sometimes it's so hard to choose something right. That's the reason why God didn't want us to eat from that tree. Because God knew that sometimes it was going to be hard to choose something right. God knew that sometimes when the fruit looked so delicious, it was going to be hard to choose something right. And maybe I got those trees backwards. I'm not sure. Seems like I might have gotten those trees backwards. So here's the tree of life, and here's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Maybe. I don't know. There's no labels on them. They have to label them for me to know exactly. But it looks here like they're eating the fruit from the other tree, right? So there's the fruit that they're eating. And the fruit looks so delicious despite that they had everything else. It's showing you would probably do the very same thing. All of us would do the very same thing. Okay, so would you want to know everything there is to know about good and evil? What did Adam and Eve do? They ate the fruit, right? They ate the fruit from the tree when they were told not to. Why? Because that darn serpent thing tempted her, right? Tempted Eve, and every one of us would have been tempted. And even though that's an ugly snake, he actually disguised himself, and he didn't look like an ugly snake because Eve would not have listened to an ugly snake. He disguised himself, and he didn't look like that. So any one of us would probably do that same thing. So they ate the fruit of the tree, but did they die? Did they die? Let me ask you something. Do you think that God made creatures to die? Do you think that he made us just to die, eventually die? Probably not, right? So did Adam and Eve die? Not right then, they didn't. They had children, and their children had children. And the planet, as we know in Noah, was filled with people, right? Men and women increased in number, multiplying throughout the earth, and God saw that they were wicked. Okay, but they they would have been made from Adam and Eve that got banished from the Garden of Eden. They were thrown out of the Garden of Eden. They might have been really hurt and upset about what they did, and had guilt and shame about what they did. And then they had children, and their children's children had children. Their children's children had children. So they had grandchildren. And did they die? Yeah. Eventually they did. Not right away, but eventually they did. After they had children and their children's children had children, then they died, right? So they filled the planet. But they might fill the planet with people who are filled with guilt and shame, right? They may have filled the planet with people who were filled with guilt and shame, that were embarrassed about what they did, that didn't want to admit what they did, right? Because what they did was really terrible. God gave them all those things and they told them not to do one thing, and they did it. You know why? Because we're human. All of us would have done that. Any one of us would have done exactly what Adam and Eve did. And that's the story God wants us to remember. That not one of us is better than Adam and Eve. Not one of us is better than them. We would have all tried to steal that piece of fruit from the one tree in the garden that we were told not to go to. And it would have been impossible for us to resist it. Maybe we could have resisted it for a week, and maybe we could have resisted it for a month. But eventually, we would have gone up and we would have snuck just a little piece of that. But Adam and Eve didn't even have it in their hearts. It came from some other place that gave them that idea. That wasn't even part of their hearts. And that's what they have to remember too. That it wasn't part of their heart. Their heart was to just listen to God. That was their heart. It was that icky, evil serpent snake, right? It was that icky, evil serpent snake right there that tempted Eve. And then Eve tempted Adam, because every one of us would have been tempted by that snake. Okay. Oh my gosh, I went way past my time. And now I've got to get going because I've got the other class at 9:15. All right, kids, thank you so much for joining me. We will get back to whatever we have to get back to over here with Adam and Eve. Try and remind me. I'll try and remember, but that's on Thursday. I got to go. All right, this is Dr. Annette Feravich. I am the teacher. This is the Early Bird Classroom. Thanks for joining me.